I never thought my own children would choose a vacation over their dying mother, but here I was, watching them pack their bags while I lay connected to machines that kept me alive. The heart attack hit me 3 days before their big cruise. 20 years they had saved for this trip to Europe. 20 years of putting money away, dreaming of fancy restaurants and beautiful cities. When the ambulance rushed me to the hospital, I thought for sure they would cancel everything. I was wrong. Sarah stood by my hospital bed, but her eyes kept looking at her phone. She was my oldest daughter, 42 years old, with 2 kids of her own. "Mom, the doctor said you're stable now," she said, not looking at me. "The cruise leaves tomorrow, and we can't get our money back." My heart monitor beeped faster, but not from my condition. It was from the pain of hearing those words. Michael, my middle child, nodded from the corner of the room. He was checking his suitcase, making sure he had everything packed. "The doctor said you'll be here for at least 2 weeks anyway," he said. "We'll be back before you even get out." David, my youngest at 35, looked uncomfortable. He kept shifting from one foot to the other. "Maybe one of us should stay," he said quietly. But Sarah shook her head quickly. "We've planned this forever, David. Mom will be fine. She's got the best doctors, and the nurses here are really nice." Sarah finally looked at me, but only for a second. "You understand, right, Mom? This is our dream trip." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that dreams can wait, but mothers can't. Instead, I just nodded. What else could I do? These were my children, the babies I had raised, the ones I had sacrificed everything for. If they wanted to leave me alone in this cold hospital room, then maybe I deserved it. The nurse, a young woman named Katie, came in to check my 4. She smiled at my children and then looked at me with kind eyes. "You're lucky to have such a big family," she said. I almost laughed, but it would have hurt too much. After they left, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The room felt so empty. Other patients had flowers and balloons. Their families brought them soup and magazines. They had people who cared enough to miss work, to change their plans, to just sit and hold their hands. I had nobody. The next morning, Katie brought me breakfast. "Your children cold," she said. "They wanted to make sure you had everything you needed before their flight." She paused, studying my face. "They seem really excited about their trip." "Yes," I whispered. "They've been planning it for a long time." Katie sat down next to my bed. She had kind eyes, the kind that really saw you. "Mrs. Henderson, can I ask you something? Do you have anyone else? Any other family or friends who might visit?" I thought about it. My husband had died 5 years ago. My sister lived across the country. Most of my friends were too old or sick to drive to the hospital. "Not really," I said. She patted my hand. "Well, you've got us. The nurses here, we become family to our patients. You won't be alone." But I was alone. That night, as I listened to the machines beeping and the other patients talking with their visitors, I realized something important. I had spent 68 years putting everyone else first. My husband, my children, my grandchildren. I had given up my dreams, my wants, my needs. And what did I have to show for it? A hospital room with no flowers and children who chose a vacation over me. The next few days blurred together. Phone calls from the cruise ship were short and filled with excitement about the food and the entertainment. Sarah sent me a picture of her dinner. Michael texted me about the shows they watched. David called once to ask how I was feeling, but I could hear the ocean and laughter in the background. Mrs. Chen, my next-door neighbor, visited on day 4. She brought me soup and sat with me for an hour. "I saw your children leaving with their suitcases," she said carefully. "They looked very happy. They're on vacation," I explained. "A cruise they've been planning for years." Mrs. Chen raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. Instead, she told me about her neighborhood. "You know, there's been a strange man taking pictures of your house," she said. "He's been there 3 times this week. Asked me who lived there and if I knew when you might be back." This caught my attention. "What kind of man?" "Well-dressed, nice car. He left his card in my mailbox by mistake. Said he buys houses for cash, really fast. I kept the card, thought you might want it." She pulled out a white business card from her purse. "Robert Martinez, cash home buyer." There was a phone number underneath. Something stirred in my chest, and it wasn't my heart condition. It was something I hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of possibility. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that business card, about my empty house, about my children enjoying their dream vacation while I lay here alone. By morning, I had made a decision that would change everything. I signed myself out of the hospital against every doctor's order, but my mind had never been clearer. The discharge nurse, Katie, looked worried as she helped me into the wheelchair. "Mrs. Henderson, are you sure about this? Your heart is still very weak. What if something happens at home?" "Then something happens," I said, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I can't stay in that room anymore, Katie. I just can't." She squeezed my shoulder. "I understand. But promise me you'll call if you need anything. And please take your medications." The taxi ride home felt like a journey to a different world. My house looked smaller somehow, quieter. The garden needed watering, and the mail was piling up. But it was mine, and for the first time in days, I could breathe. I sat in my kitchen and stared at Robert Martinez's business card. Mrs. Chen had been right to save it. I picked up the phone and dialed before I could change my mind. "Martinez Home Buying," a friendly voice answered. "Hello, this is Eleanor Henderson. I think you've been looking at my house on Maple Street." "Mrs. Henderson?" "Yes, absolutely. I've been hoping to reach you. I represent investors who buy homes quickly for cash. Are you interested in selling?" My heart pounded, but not for my condition. "How quickly?" "If you're serious, we could close in 48 hours. Cash deal, no inspections, no repairs needed. We buy houses exactly as they are." I thought about Sarah's excited voice describing her fancy dinner. I thought about Michael's texts about the entertainment shows. I thought about David calling me while ocean waves crashed in the background. "I'm serious," I said. "Robert came over that afternoon. He was exactly as Mrs. Chen had described him, well-dressed, professional, kind. He walked through my house, taking notes, but not judging the old furniture or the outdated wallpaper. "This is a beautiful home," he said, sitting at my kitchen table. "Full of memories, I bet." 60 years worth," I said. "I raised 3 children here." "And now?" I paused. "Now they're all grown up and living their own lives." He nodded like he understood. "Mrs. Henderson, I can offer you $400,000, cash, close in 2 days. That's a fair price for this neighborhood, and you won't have to deal with realtors or repairs or showing the house to strangers." $400,000. More money than I had ever seen in my life. Money that could buy me freedom, choices, a new start. "I'll take it," I said. The next 2 days moved like a movie in fast forward. Lawyers, paperwork, bank transfers. I called a moving company and told them to put everything in storage. Everything except what I would take with me. I packed 1 suitcase with my most important things. My husband's love letters from when he was in the war. My grandmother's pearl necklace that came from Ireland. The photo album with pictures of my children when they were small and still needed me. The rest could stay in storage or be sold. I didn't need much where I was going. Where was I going? I bought a bus ticket to Portland, Oregon. It was far enough away that nobody would find me, big enough that I could disappear, and rainy enough that it matched how I felt inside. The morning I left, I sat at my kitchen table one last time and wrote a letter. I kept it simple. "My dear children, I have decided to start a new life. The house is sold, and I am gone. Don't look for me. I need to find out who I am when I'm not just somebody's mother. I love you, but I love myself too. Mom." I left the letter on the kitchen counter where they would find it when they came to check on me after their vacation. Mrs. Chen knocked on my door as I was putting my suitcase in the taxi. "Eleanor, where are you going?" she asked, looking worried. "Somewhere new," I said, hugging her tight. "Thank you for the business card. You changed my life. But what about your children? What will they think when they come back?" I looked at my house one last time. The house where I had cooked thousands of meals, bandaged scraped knees, helped with homework, waited up for teenagers to come home safely. The house where I had been a mother for 40 years and nothing else. "They'll think whatever they want to think," I said, getting into the taxi. "But for the first time in my life, that's not my problem." As the taxi pulled away, I saw Mrs. Chen standing in her driveway, still holding the soup container she had brought me in the hospital. She looked confused and worried, but also a little proud. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, having the most amazing time. The food is incredible. Hope you're feeling better. I turned off my phone and put it in my purse. Sarah was having an amazing time, and so was I. The difference was, I was just getting started. The bus station was crowded with people going to new places, starting new adventures. I bought my ticket and found a seat near the window. In 3 hours, I would be in Portland, Oregon, living under a new name, with enough money to do whatever I wanted. Eleanor Henderson was disappearing forever. But Margaret Sullivan was about to be born. 3 days after disappearing, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, reading the newspaper like I was just another old lady enjoying her morning, but I wasn't Eleanor Henderson anymore. The bus ride had taken 18 hours, and every mile felt like freedom. I watched the countryside change from flat farmland to rolling hills to tall mountains. Other passengers got on and off, all of them going somewhere new, just like me. An older man sat next to me for a few hours and told me about his daughter in Seattle. A young mother with a baby smiled at me when her little one started crying. For the first time in months, I felt like I was part of the world again. When I got to Portland, the rain was falling softly, just like I had hoped. I took a taxi to a small hotel downtown and paid cash for a week. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes, didn't ask any questions when I signed the register as Margaret Sullivan. "Welcome to Portland, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, handing me the key. "Is this your first time here?" "Yes," I said, and it felt good to tell the truth. "I'm starting over." He smiled. "This is a good city for that. Lots of people come here to start new lives." My room was small but clean, with a window that looked out over the river. I sat on the bed and opened my suitcase, touching my husband's letters and my grandmother's jewelry. These were the only things that connected me to my old life, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep them or let them go too. The next morning, I walked around the city. Portland was different from anywhere I had ever lived. People were friendly but not nosy. They let you be yourself without asking too many questions. I found a small apartment building with a "for rent" sign in the window. The landlord was a woman about my age named Grace. She had gray hair and wore comfortable shoes, and she didn't seem surprised when I told her I wanted to pay the first year's rent in cash. "Running from something?" she asked, but not in a mean way. "Running to something," I corrected her. She laughed. "I like that better. The apartment is yours, Margaret." Within a week, I had a new home, a new name, and a new life. I bought simple furniture and hung my grandmother's picture on the wall. I found a grocery store where the clerks learned my name and a library where I could sit and read for hours. But the best part was the silence. No phone calls asking me to babysit or clean or cook or solve problems. No guilt about not doing enough or being enough. Just quiet mornings with coffee and books, and afternoons walking by the river. I started volunteering at the animal shelter. The dogs didn't care that I was Margaret Sullivan instead of Eleanor Henderson. They just wanted someone to pet them and tell them they were good. I loved the work, and it felt good to help creatures who needed care without asking for anything in return. One day, while I was walking a golden retriever named Sunny, my phone rang. I had kept it turned off for weeks, but that morning I had turned it on to check the weather. The caller ID said, "Sarah." My heart jumped, but I didn't answer. The phone kept ringing, then stopped, then started again. This time it was Michael. Then David. Then Sarah again. I knew what this meant. They were back from their vacation. That evening, I finally listened to the voicemails. Sarah's voice was panicked. "Mom, where are you? We went to the house, and it's empty. There's a sold sign in the yard and strangers living there. There's just a note that doesn't make any sense. Please call me back." Michael's message was angry. "Mom, this isn't funny. You can't just disappear like this. We have families to think about. Call me immediately." David's voice was different. Softer. "Grandma, I don't understand what happened, but I'm worried about you. Please just let us know you're okay. We love you." I almost called David back. Almost. But then I remembered how he had sounded on the cruise ship, how the ocean waves and laughter had been more important than my voice. Instead, I turned off the phone again and made myself dinner. Chicken soup and crackers, simple and good. I ate at my little table by the window, watching the rain fall on the river, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The next morning, Grace knocked on my door. Margaret, there's been a man asking questions about you. Says he's looking for his mother, Eleanor Henderson. Showed me a picture that looks a lot like you. My stomach dropped. What did you tell him? I told him I don't know any Eleanor Henderson. Only Margaret Sullivan, and she's been my tenant for months. Grace winked. Was I telling the truth? I looked at this woman who had become my friend, who was protecting me without even knowing why. Yes, I said. You were telling the truth. Good. I thought so. But Margaret, are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need help? I thought about how to answer. I'm not in trouble, I said finally. I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not who everyone expects me to be. Grace nodded like she understood completely. Take all the time you need. But maybe you should think about getting a job, making some friends your own age. This city has a lot to offer if you're willing to look for it. That afternoon, I walked to the community center and looked at the bulletin board. There were notices for book clubs, art classes, senior hiking groups, and volunteer opportunities. One flyer caught my eye: pottery classes for beginners. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. All supplies included. Come create something beautiful. I had never made pottery in my life. Eleanor Henderson had never had time for art or creativity or anything that wasn't about taking care of other people. But Margaret Sullivan had all the time in the world. I signed up for the class and paid the fee in cash. The instructor, a woman named Beth, welcomed me with a smile. Have you ever worked with clay before? No, I said, but I'm ready to learn. As I sat at the pottery wheel for the first time, feeling the clay spin between my hands, I realized something important. I wasn't just hiding from my old life. I was building a new one, piece by piece, just like the bowl I was trying to make. My phone buzzed with another call from Sarah, but I didn't even look at it. Margaret Sullivan had pottery class, and that was more important than anything Eleanor Henderson's daughter had to say. 2 months into my new life, I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop when the most unexpected thing happened. I met someone who made me remember what it felt like to be seen as more than just a mother. His name was Walter, and he was reading the same book I had just finished. He looked up from his table and smiled. Excuse me, but is that the new mystery by Louise Penny? I've been waiting for it to come back to the library. I looked down at my book and then back at him. He had kind eyes and gray hair, and he was wearing a sweater that looked hand-knitted. Yes, it is. I just finished it this morning. Would you like to borrow it? That's very kind of you, he said, standing up. I'm Walter Morrison. Mind if I sit with you for a minute? I hesitated for just a second. Eleanor Henderson would have said no, would have made an excuse about needing to get home. But Margaret Sullivan had nowhere to be, and no one waiting for her. I'm Margaret Sullivan, I said. Please, sit down. Walter was 72 years old, a retired teacher who had moved to Portland after his wife died 3 years ago. He volunteered at the food bank and took photography classes at the community college. He was interesting and funny and actually listened when I talked. What brought you to Portland, Margaret? He asked over coffee. I needed a change, I said, which was true. My old life wasn't working anymore. He nodded. I understand that. After my wife passed, I realized I had to choose between being sad forever or finding a new way to be happy. Which did you choose? Both, he said, smiling. I'm still sad sometimes, but I'm also happy in ways I didn't expect. It's possible to be both things at the same time. We talked for 2 hours about books and movies and places we had traveled. He told me about his daughter in California who called him every week and his grandchildren who sent him drawings. I told him about my pottery class and my volunteer work at the animal shelter. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? He asked as we got ready to leave. I almost said no. Eleanor Henderson had been married for 35 years and had never dated anyone else. But Margaret Sullivan was free to make her own choices. I would like that, I said. That evening, I called my pottery teacher Beth. We had become friends over the past few weeks, and she was one of the few people who knew a little about my situation. Beth, I need to ask you something, I said. If someone from your past life wanted to start over completely, how would they do it? Well, she said thoughtfully, they'd probably need to make their new identity more official. You can't live as someone else forever without proper paperwork. What kind of paperwork? A good lawyer could help with that. There are legal ways to change your name, get new identification. It's not cheap, but it's possible. I thought about the money in my bank account. $400,000 was more than enough to start over properly. The next day, I met with a lawyer named James Chen. He was Mrs. Chen's grandson, though he didn't know about my connection to his grandmother. He specialized in helping people make fresh starts. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, what you're asking for is completely legal. You have the right to change your name, get new identification, start a new life. But can I ask why you want to do this? I had practiced this answer. My previous life was very difficult. I was in a bad situation, and I need to make sure I can never be forced to go back to it. He nodded. I understand. We'll need to file paperwork in several states, but I can make Margaret Sullivan your legal name within a few months. What about my old life? What happens to Eleanor Henderson? She'll still exist on paper, but Margaret Sullivan will be a separate, legal person. You'll have the right to live as Margaret for the rest of your life if you choose. I paid him $5,000 and signed the papers. For the first time since I had left home, I felt truly safe. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing with calls from my children. I had started listening to the voicemails, just to make sure no one was sick or in real trouble. The messages had changed over the weeks. Sarah's voice was less panicked now, but more desperate. Mom, please just call me. We know you're upset about the vacation, and we're sorry. We want to talk to you. Michael sounded frustrated. Mom, you're being ridiculous. You can't just disappear because you're mad at us. We're your family. David's messages were the hardest to hear. Grandma, I've been thinking about what you said in your note. About finding out who you are when you're not just our mother. I think I understand now. But I miss you. I miss talking to you. Can't we figure this out together? I almost called David back. Almost. But then Walter invited me to dinner, and I realized I had something better to think about. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant by the river. Walter brought me flowers, not expensive roses, but simple daisies from his garden. He held my chair and asked about my day and told me stories about his students. You're different from other women I've met, he said over dessert. How so? You seem like you've just discovered who you are. Most people our age are set in their ways, but you're still learning and growing. It's attractive. I felt my cheeks turn red. I'm 70 years old, Walter. I should be set in my ways. Says who? He asked. I think 70 is the perfect age to become whoever you want to be. That night, I sat in my apartment and looked at my husband's letters. I had loved him deeply, but I realized I had never really known who I was without him. I had gone from being my parents' daughter to my husband's wife to my children's mother. I had never just been me. Margaret Sullivan was the first person I had ever been who belonged only to herself. My phone rang again. This time it was David, but I didn't listen to the voicemail. Instead, I turned off the phone and made myself a cup of tea. Tomorrow, Walter was taking me to see a movie, and I was going to pottery class, and I was going to walk the dogs at the shelter. Eleanor Henderson's children could wait. Margaret Sullivan had a life to live. 6 months after vanishing, I was feeding stray cats behind my apartment building when I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. It was Sarah, and she was closer than I ever imagined possible. Excuse me, have you seen this woman? I heard her say to someone near the front of the building. She's my mother, and she's been missing for months. I crouched behind the dumpster, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me another heart attack. Through a crack in the fence, I could see Sarah showing a photograph to my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She looked tired and desperate, wearing the same blue coat she'd worn to the hospital. No, I haven't seen her, Mrs. Rodriguez said kindly. But I hope you find her soon. Sarah's voice cracked. Thank you. She's sick, and we're so worried about her. I watched my daughter walk away, her shoulders bent with worry. Part of me wanted to run after her, to hug her and tell her I was okay. But a bigger part of me remembered how she had looked at her phone instead of me when I was dying in that hospital bed. I waited until she was gone before going back to my apartment. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. Grace was waiting for me in the hallway. Margaret, that woman was asking about you again, she said quietly. She's been here 3 times this week. She seems really upset. What did you tell her? Same thing I always tell her. I don't know any Eleanor Henderson. Only Margaret Sullivan, and she's been my tenant for almost a year now. Grace studied my face. But Margaret, she's your daughter, isn't she? I nodded, unable to lie to this woman who had protected me for so long. Why are you hiding from your own child? Grace asked gently. I sat down on the stairs, suddenly feeling very old and very tired. Because she left me to die alone while she went on vacation. Because she never calls unless she needs something. Because for 40 years, I was just a person who cooked and cleaned and took care of everyone else. Grace sat down next to me. And now? Now I'm Margaret Sullivan. I make pottery and volunteer at the animal shelter and have a boyfriend who brings me flowers just because. I'm happy, Grace. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. That evening, Walter came over for dinner. I cooked his favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, and we sat by the window watching the rain. He could tell something was wrong. You seem worried tonight, he said, taking my hand. What's troubling you? I told him about Sarah, about how close she had come to finding me. Walter listened carefully, the way he always did. Margaret, can I ask you something? Do you think you'll hide forever? I don't know, I said honestly. I'm scared that if I go back to being Eleanor Henderson, I'll lose everything I've built here. I'll lose myself again. Walter squeezed my hand. You won't lose yourself. You're not the same person who disappeared 6 months ago. You're stronger now, more confident. You know who you are. But what if they want me to be their mother again? What if they expect me to drop everything and take care of them like I used to? Then you tell them no, Walter said simply. You tell them that Margaret Sullivan has her own life, and Eleanor Henderson's children need to respect that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah's tired face, about how worried she looked. I thought about Michael and David, about how they must be feeling. For the first time since I left, I felt guilty. The next morning, I decided to listen to my voicemails. There were dozens of them, going back months. Sarah's voice had changed from angry to desperate to heartbroken. Mom, it's been 4 months. Please, just let us know you're alive. I can't eat, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the last time I saw you in the hospital, and I hate myself for what I said. Michael's messages were different now too. Mom, I know we messed up. I know we hurt you. But you're our mother, and we love you. We need to make this right. David's voice was the one that broke my heart. Grandma, I've been going to therapy. I'm learning about how families hurt each other without meaning to. I understand now why you left. I just hope someday you'll forgive us enough to come back. I sat in my apartment, crying for the first time since I'd arrived in Portland. These were my children, the babies I had held and fed and worried about. They were in pain, and I was the cause of it. But I was also in pain. Years and years of being taken for granted, of being invisible, of being treated like furniture that's useful but not important. I called Beth, my pottery teacher, and asked if we could meet for coffee. Margaret, you look terrible, she said when she saw me. What's wrong? I told her everything. About Eleanor Henderson, about the hospital, about my children finding me. Beth listened without judging. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. I love my new life, but I miss my children. I'm angry at them, but I'm also worried about them. I don't know how to be both things at the same time. Maybe you don't have to choose, Beth said. Maybe you can be Margaret Sullivan and still have a relationship with your children, but it would have to be on your terms, not theirs. That afternoon, I went to the animal shelter. Sunny, the golden retriever I had been walking for months, seemed to sense my mood. She stayed close to me, pressing against my leg as we walked. What do you think, Sunny? I asked her. Should I call my children? She looked up at me with those wise brown eyes, and I swear she nodded. When I got home, Sarah was sitting on the steps of my apartment building. She looked up when she saw me, and her face went white. Mom, she whispered. I stopped walking. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and wanting in equal measure. Hello, Sarah, I said. She stood up slowly, like she was afraid I might disappear again. I knew it was you. I've been watching this building for weeks. I saw you walking that dog, and I knew. We stared at each other for a long moment. She looked older, thinner, sadder than I remembered. How did you find me? I asked. We hired a private investigator. It took months, but he finally connected Eleanor Henderson to Margaret Sullivan through some hospital records. She stepped closer. Mom, are you okay? Are you safe? I'm fine, Sarah. I'm better than fine. We need to talk, she said. Please. Can we just talk? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was scared and sorry and desperate. She was also the same person who had chosen a vacation over her dying mother. Yes, I said finally. We can talk. But not here. And not as Eleanor Henderson. If you want to talk to me, you'll have to talk to Margaret Sullivan. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. You will, I said, unlocking the door to my building. But first, you need to call your brothers. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. The next morning, all three of my children sat in my small living room, looking around at the life I had built without them, and I could see the shock in their eyes when they realized how happy I had become. Michael spoke first, his voice tight with controlled anger. Mom, this is insane. You can't just disappear and become someone else. You're our mother. You have responsibilities. I set down my coffee cup and looked at him calmly. Margaret Sullivan wasn't afraid of Michael's anger the way Eleanor Henderson had been. What responsibilities? I asked. You're all adults with your own families. What exactly do you need me for? That's not the point, Michael said. You can't just run away because you're upset about a vacation. Sarah shot him a look. Michael, stop. This isn't about the vacation, and you know it. David had been quiet since they arrived, just looking around my apartment. Grandma, he said finally, you seem different. Happier. I am happier, I said. Happier than I've been in years. But why? Sarah asked, tears in her eyes. Why did you have to disappear to be happy? Why couldn't you just talk to us? I thought about how to answer. Sarah, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something, not because it was a holiday, but just because you wanted to talk to me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Michael, when was the last time you visited me without asking me to babysit or cook dinner or help with something? Michael looked uncomfortable. David, when was the last time you included me in your life instead of just updating me about it? David looked down at his hands. I spent 40 years being your mother, I continued. I cooked your meals, cleaned your clothes, drove you to activities, helped with homework, worried about you every single day. And when you grew up, I kept doing it. I kept making myself available for whatever you needed. That's what mothers do, Michael said. No, I said firmly. That's what I did. But it's not what mothers have to do forever. At some point, children are supposed to become adults who care about their parents as people, not just as sources of help. Sarah was crying now. Mom, we do care about you. Do you? Sarah, what's my favorite color? She looked confused. I don't know. Michael, what book am I reading right now? I have no idea. David, what do I do for fun? You watch TV? I stood up and walked to my bookshelf. I pulled out a photo album and showed them pictures of my pottery class, my volunteer work at the animal shelter, my hiking group. This is what I do for fun, I said. I make beautiful things with my hands. I help animals who need care. I explore the city with people who've become my friends. I have a boyfriend who brings me flowers and listens to my stories. A boyfriend? Sarah asked, looking shocked. His name is Walter. He's a retired teacher, and he's kind and funny and interested in who I am as a person, not just what I can do for him. Michael looked angry again. Mom, you were married to Dad for 35 years. How can you just replace him? I'm not replacing your father, I said. I loved him deeply. But he's been gone for 5 years, and I'm still alive. I'm allowed to be happy. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Walter, holding a bouquet of flowers from his garden. Margaret, I'm sorry to interrupt, he said. I just wanted to drop these off. Walter, come in, I said. I'd like you to meet my children. The awkwardness in the room was thick as I introduced them. Walter was polite and friendly, but I could see my children studying him, trying to figure out who this man was and why he was in their mother's life. I'll leave you to your family time, Walter said after a few minutes. Margaret, I'll call you later. After he left, David spoke first. He seems nice, Grandma. He is nice, I said. He treats me like I matter. We think you matter, Sarah said quietly. Do you? Because when I was dying in the hospital, you left me alone to go on vacation. When I needed you most, you chose your own happiness over mine. We thought you were going to be fine, Michael said defensively. You thought wrong. I almost died, Michael. The doctors told me later that I was much sicker than they first realized. I could have died alone in that hospital room while you were eating fancy dinners and watching shows. The room was quiet for a long moment. We're sorry, Sarah whispered. We're so sorry, Mom. I know you are, I said. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't change the fact that when I needed you, you weren't there. So what do we do now? David asked. How do we fix this? I sat back down and looked at my 3 children. They looked like strangers to me, but they also looked like the babies I had raised. I felt angry and sad and hopeful all at the same time. You don't fix this, I said. You can't go back and change what happened. But you can decide what happens next. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean I'm not coming back to my old life. Eleanor Henderson is gone. Margaret Sullivan is who I am now, and this is where I live. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be with the person I am now, not the person you remember. But you're still our mother, Michael said. Yes, I'm still your mother. But I'm also Margaret Sullivan, who has her own life and her own interests and her own boyfriend. I'm a person who makes pottery and volunteers at an animal shelter and goes hiking with friends. If you want to know me, you have to be interested in all of that, not just the parts that relate to you. Sarah wiped her eyes. Okay. Tell us about your pottery class. I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. I'm making a set of bowls. Blue and green, like the ocean. Beth, my teacher, says I have natural talent. Can we see them? David asked. I went to my bedroom and brought back one of my bowls. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its own way. David held it carefully, turning it over in his hands. You made this? He asked, sounding amazed. I did. Margaret Sullivan made it. Eleanor Henderson never would have tried. Why not? Sarah asked. Because Eleanor Henderson was too busy taking care of everyone else to take care of herself. She never had time for art or hobbies or friends. She never had time to figure out who she was. Michael was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Mom, can I ask you something? Are you happier now than you were before? Much happier, I said honestly. Even without us? I thought about it. Michael, I love you all very much. But I can't be happy if being your mother means I can't be anything else. I need to be both things, your mother and my own person. How do we do that? Sarah asked. You start by getting to know Margaret Sullivan. You visit me here, in my home, and you're interested in my life. You meet Walter and my friends. You ask me about my pottery and my volunteer work. You treat me like a person you want to know, not just a resource you want to use. David nodded slowly. I think I understand. You want us to be your friends, not just your children. Exactly, I said. I want a relationship with you that's based on love and interest, not just obligation and need. Sarah looked around my apartment again. Mom, can I ask you something else? Do you think you'll ever forgive us for the vacation? I reached over and took her hand. Sarah, I forgive you, but I won't forget. What happened taught me that I have to take care of myself, because no one else will. We will, Michael said. We'll take care of you now. No, I said firmly. I'll take care of myself. But maybe, if you're willing to try, we can take care of each other. Outside, it started to rain, and I could see Walter working in his garden across the street. My children were in my living room, trying to understand the woman I had become. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to be a family again. But it would have to be on Margaret Sullivan's terms, not Eleanor Henderson's. 3 weeks after that difficult family meeting, I was showing Walter my engagement ring when Sarah called with news that would change everything forever. Michael had been in a terrible car accident, and this time, someone really was dying. Mom, you need to come home right now. Sarah's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. Michael's in the ICU. The doctors don't think he's going to make it. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair. The engagement ring Walter had given me just an hour before suddenly feeling heavy on my finger. What happened? A drunk driver hit him head-on. He's been in surgery for 6 hours. Mom, he keeps asking for you. He keeps saying he needs to tell you something. Walter took the phone from my shaking hands. Sarah, this is Walter, your mother's fiancé. Where is Michael now? I listened as Walter got all the details. The hospital name, the room number, the visiting hours. My mind was spinning. Just 3 weeks ago, I had told my children that I was Margaret Sullivan now, that they needed to respect my new life. Now Michael was dying, and he was asking for his mother. Margaret, we need to pack, Walter said gently after hanging up. I'm driving you there. Walter, I can't. If I go back, I'll become Eleanor Henderson again. I'll lose everything I've built here. No, you won't, he said, taking my hands. You're not the same person who ran away a year ago. You're stronger now. You can go help your son without losing yourself. What if I can't? What if I get there and fall back into all the old patterns? Walter smiled and touched the engagement ring on my finger. Then I'll be there to remind you who you really are. We're a team now, Margaret. You don't have to face this alone. The drive back to my old hometown took 8 hours. Walter drove while I stared out the window, watching familiar places pass by. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, sadder somehow. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I felt like I was traveling back in time. This was the same hospital where I had been abandoned, where my journey as Margaret Sullivan had begun. Sarah and David were waiting in the ICU waiting room. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days, and David's eyes were red from crying. When they saw me, they both stood up. Mom, Sarah whispered, hugging me tight. Thank you for coming. How is he? I asked. Not good, David said. The doctors say the next few hours are critical. He's been unconscious mostly, but sometimes he wakes up and asks for you. I introduced Walter to David, who shook his hand politely but seemed confused. Mom, are you really engaged? Yes, I said, showing him the ring. Walter asked me to marry him this morning. Congratulations, David said, and he seemed to mean it. I'm glad you're happy. A doctor came out to talk to us. Dr. Peterson was a young woman with kind eyes and serious news. Michael's condition is very grave. The injury to his brain is severe. If he survives, there will likely be significant changes to his personality and abilities. Can we see him? Sarah asked. Family only, and only 2 at a time. I looked at Walter. Will you wait for me? Of course, he said. Take all the time you need. Sarah and I went into Michael's room first. He looked so small and fragile connected to all those machines. His face was bruised and swollen, and he had bandages covering most of his head. Michael, Sarah said softly. Mom's here. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked at me with confusion. Mom? Is that really you? Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. I thought you were Margaret Sullivan now, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I am Margaret Sullivan, but I'm also your mother, and I'm here. Tears ran down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about the vacation, about leaving you in the hospital, about everything. I was selfish and stupid, and now I'm dying, and I never got to make it right. I took his hand, careful not to disturb the 4. Michael, you're not dying. You're going to fight this and get better. The doctor told me the truth. My brain is damaged. Even if I live, I won't be the same person. I might not remember things, might not be able to work or take care of my family. Sarah was crying quietly in the corner. Michael, listen to me, I said. Whatever happens, you're still my son. If you need help, we'll figure it out. But you have to fight. Will you stay? Will you help me? I looked at this man who had been my angry, demanding middle child, who had told me I was being ridiculous for wanting respect and consideration. Now he was broken and scared and asking his mother to save him. I'll stay until you're better, I said. But Michael, things are different now. I'm different now. I know. Sarah told me about your new life, about Walter. I'm happy for you, Mom. I really am. You are. You seem stronger, more confident. Even in this terrible situation, you're not falling apart like you used to. Margaret Sullivan is good for you. Over the next few days, I stayed at the hospital while Walter got us a hotel room nearby. I spent hours with Michael, talking to him, reading to him, helping him remember things when his memory got fuzzy. But I also made sure to take breaks. I had dinner with Walter every evening, called my pottery teacher Beth to check on my class, and talked to Grace about my apartment. I was helping my son, but I wasn't disappearing into the role of caretaker like Eleanor Henderson would have done. Sarah noticed the difference. Mom, you're handling this so much better than you used to handle crises. How do you mean? You're calm and strong, but you're also taking care of yourself. The old you would have slept in that chair and not eaten for days. David agreed. Grandma, you seem like you know exactly who you are now. Even in this scary situation, you're still Margaret Sullivan. That made me proud. I was helping my family without losing myself. After a week, Michael was stable enough to start talking about the future. His memory was better, but he would need months of therapy and wouldn't be able to work for a long time. Mom, I need to ask you something, he said one afternoon. Will you move back home to help me? I had been dreading this question. Michael, I can't move back. My life is in Portland now. But I need you. You need help, but it doesn't have to be from me. Sarah and David can help you. You can hire nurses and therapists. You have options. It's not the same. No, it's not the same. But Michael, I can't give up my life to take care of you. I did that for 40 years, and it almost killed me. He was quiet for a long time. I understand, he said finally. I don't like it, but I understand. I'll visit often. I'll help you find good care. I'll always be your mother. But I won't be your full-time caretaker. What if I said I was sorry? What if I promised to be a better son? I smiled and squeezed his hand. Michael, you don't have to earn my love. You already have it. But love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my happiness for yours. That evening, Walter and I walked around the hospital grounds. How are you feeling about all this? He asked. Sad for Michael, but also proud of myself. A year ago, I would have moved back immediately and given up everything to take care of him. Now I know I can help him without losing myself. That's what I love about you, Margaret. You've learned the difference between love and sacrifice. What do you mean? Eleanor Henderson thought love meant giving up everything for other people. Margaret Sullivan knows that real love means taking care of yourself so you can be strong enough to help others. The next morning, Michael was doing so much better that the doctors said he could go home in a few days. He would need a lot of help, but he was going to survive and recover most of his abilities. Mom, he said as I was getting ready to leave, I want you to know something. Watching you this week, seeing how you handled everything, I'm proud of you. Proud of me? You found yourself. You became the person you were meant to be. And you did it without hurting anyone or being mean about it. You just quietly became amazing. I kissed his forehead. Get better, Michael. And remember, being my son doesn't mean you own me. It means I love you enough to want you to be independent and strong. As Walter and I drove back to Portland, I realized something important. I had passed the biggest test of my new life. I had faced a crisis that would have destroyed Eleanor Henderson, and Margaret Sullivan had handled it perfectly. I had helped my family without sacrificing my happiness. I had loved my son without losing myself. When we got home, Grace was waiting with a bottle of champagne. I heard about the engagement, she said, hugging me tight. I'm so happy for you both. That night, as I sat in my apartment looking at my engagement ring and thinking about everything that had happened, I knew I had made the right choice. Margaret Sullivan was here to stay. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning in Portland, I stood in my wedding dress looking at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw exactly who I was meant to be. Not someone's mother or wife or caretaker, but Margaret Sullivan, a woman who had learned to love herself first. The dress was simple and elegant, pale blue like the pottery bowls I had been making. Walter had picked the color because he said it matched my eyes. My hair was styled in a way Eleanor Henderson never would have dared, modern and confident, with silver highlights that caught the light. You look beautiful, Grandma, David said from behind me. He had arrived the night before with his new girlfriend, a kind woman named Lisa who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Thank you, sweetheart. Are Sarah and Michael here yet? They just pulled up. Michael's walking pretty well now. You can barely tell he was hurt. I smiled. Michael's recovery had been remarkable. He'd had to relearn some things and would always have a slight limp, but his personality and memory were intact. More importantly, he had used his accident as a chance to think about his life and make changes. Sarah appeared in the doorway, carrying flowers. Mom, these came for you. I read the card attached to the beautiful bouquet of wildflowers. To my brave grandmother, who taught us that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. Love, Michael. My eyes filled with tears. In the past 6 months, my relationship with my children had completely changed. They called regularly now, not because they needed something, but because they wanted to know how I was doing. They asked about my pottery classes, my volunteer work, my friends. Sarah had even visited Portland twice, staying in a hotel and taking me out to dinner. She'd met Walter and my friends, seen my apartment, watched me walk the dogs at the shelter. I never knew you were so interesting, Mom, she'd said after her first visit. Michael had surprised me the most. His accident had changed him in ways that had nothing to do with his injuries. He was kinder, more thoughtful, more interested in other people. He called every Sunday just to chat, asking about my week and telling me about his physical therapy. Mom, can I ask you something? Sarah said as she helped me with my necklace. Do you ever miss being Eleanor Henderson? I thought about it. Sometimes I miss the simple certainty of that life. Eleanor always knew what was expected of her. But I don't miss feeling invisible or unimportant. We made you feel invisible? Not on purpose. But yes, you did. You saw me as a function, not a person. Mom the cook, Mom the babysitter, Mom the problem solver. You never saw Margaret the individual. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I see her now. And I like her better than the old version. Why? Because she's interesting and funny and has opinions about things. Because she makes beautiful pottery and has adventures and is in love with a man who treats her well. The old mom was just there. Available. Waiting. David nodded. Grandma, you taught us something important. You can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself first. There was a knock on the door. Walter's daughter Karen had driven up from California for the wedding. She was a lovely woman in her 40s who had welcomed me into her family immediately. Margaret, are you ready? She asked. Dad's getting nervous. I laughed. Tell him I'm not going anywhere. I've waited 71 years to find him. The wedding was in the community center where I took pottery classes. Beth had helped me decorate with flowers and candles. About 30 people were there, Walter's family, my children and their families, friends from the animal shelter, my hiking group, neighbors from my apartment building. Grace walked me down the aisle, which felt perfect. She had been the first person to see Margaret Sullivan as real, and she had protected me when I needed protection. Walter looked handsome in his dark suit, his eyes bright with happiness. When I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, "You look beautiful, my dear." The ceremony was simple and meaningful. We wrote our own vows, promising to love and support each other while remaining individuals. We promised to share adventures and create new memories together. I never thought I'd get married again at 71. I said in my vows. But Walter, you didn't just fall in love with Margaret Sullivan. You helped create her. You saw who I could be and loved me into becoming that person. Walter's vows made everyone cry. Margaret, you are the bravest person I know. You had the courage to start over, to become who you were meant to be. You inspire me every day to be better, to try new things, to never give up on happiness. After the ceremony, we had a small reception with cake and dancing. My children seemed genuinely happy for me. Michael danced with me carefully, still protecting his healing body. Mom, I need to tell you something, he said as we swayed to the music. This whole experience, your disappearance, my accident, getting to know you again, it saved my marriage. How? Jennifer and I were taking each other for granted, just like we took you for granted. When I almost died, we realized we needed to actually see each other, pay attention to each other. We're happy now in a way we haven't been for years. Sarah overheard. Mom, you didn't just save yourself when you became Margaret Sullivan. You saved all of us. You taught us how to have real relationships instead of just going through the motions. David joined our conversation. Grandma, Lisa, and I have been talking about this. We want to make sure we don't make the same mistakes with our parents that we made with you. We're going to do better. Later, as Walter and I cut the cake, I looked around at all these people who had become part of my new life. Mrs. Chen had even driven down from my old neighborhood, bringing me a photo album of memories from the house on Maple Street. Margaret, she said, hugging me tight, I'm so proud of you. You took my grandson's business card and built a whole new life. As the evening wound down, my children helped clean up while Walter and I sat together, still in our wedding clothes, watching our families work together. Any regrets? Walter asked. About what? About leaving your old life behind. About all the pain you went through to get here. I thought about Eleanor Henderson, about the woman who had been so sad and invisible and taken for granted. I thought about that terrible day in the hospital when my children chose a vacation over their dying mother. No regrets, I said. That pain led me here, to this moment, to this happiness. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. And what really matters? Knowing who you are. Being brave enough to become that person. And finding people who love you for who you really are, not just for what you can do for them. Walter kissed me as our families laughed and talked around us. I love you, Margaret Sullivan Morrison. I love you too. As we drove away from our wedding reception, heading to our honeymoon in the mountains, I realized that my story had come full circle. I had started as Eleanor Henderson, a woman who existed only in relation to other people. I had become Margaret Sullivan, a woman who belonged to herself. And now I was Margaret Morrison, a woman who could love and be loved without losing herself. The last year and a half had been the hardest and best of my life. I had learned that it's never too late to start over, never too late to become who you're meant to be, never too late to find real happiness. My children had learned that love isn't about sacrifice and duty, but about respect and genuine interest in each other as people. And I had learned that sometimes the best gift you can give your family is showing them that they don't own you, that you are a complete person worthy of love and consideration. As we drove into the sunset, Walter reached over and took my hand. So, Mrs. Morrison, what's our next adventure? I squeezed his hand and smiled. Whatever we want it to be. We have the rest of our lives to figure it out. For the first time in my 71 years, the future was mine to choose. And that felt like the greatest gift of all.